Afternoon, everybody. My name is Dylan Turnbull. I'm a developer advocate here at Brokk.ai, and I have with me today Jonathan, who also works at Brokk and is also the founder and CEO of Brokk. Today, we're going to be covering the Brokk Power Ranking, which is our view into how LLMs perform and built off of real-world testing. So to get us started, why don't I go ahead and hand it off to you, Jonathan, and you can tell us a little bit about the genesis of the Brokk Power Ranking.
I'd love to. So we built the power ranking to tell us and everyone how good LLMs are at writing code. And you might think, oh, well, I've seen SWE-bench, I've seen live codebench, like these things exist. And they do exist, but there's three problems that we wanted to solve that nobody else was tackling. The first is that a lot of these other benchmarks, and I would say especially SWE-bench, are the tasks that they test are well known at this point, and they're part of the model's training data. And you'll see that some of the labs are very scrupulous about pulling those tests out of the training data so that SWE-bench stays a relevant ranking of how well they're doing. But other labs are just like, hey, we want the number to go up because that helps us market our models better. And so they're just like, sure, like memorize the test. Like that's what they're doing, is they're memorizing.
Yeah, they're poisoning the well, so to speak.
Yeah, so the three things we wanted to deliver are, we wanted to deliver fresh tests that nobody's had a chance to train on yet. And we wanted to test with meaningful, meaty, enterprisey problems, covering multiple files, covering many patches that need to be applied to those files. And then the third one is, we want to measure speed and cost and not just, hey, did you pass or not? Because when you're sitting in front of the monitor pair programming with a model, that's really important to stay in the flow. Is, can it deliver results quickly? And then it's going to make you a lot happier if it's light on your wallet. So we wanted to measure all three of those.
I think that from my experience working with AI assisted development, it has been a source of frustration, at least from my vantage point, where I'll be working on a particular, like a new feature in something, and then I'll get further down the line and it will have affected something else in the code. And then I'll spend the next 30, 40 minutes, maybe even an hour, burning tokens to try to back up or undo what's been done. And to say that the cost of that, or even the fact that if you're paying a monthly fee for something and you get an allotment of tokens, the idea that you just burned a bunch of money that you spent because the model, you don't know how the model is expected to perform.
Yeah, and I would say, for me, and I think for most people whose bosses are paying for this, the speed aspect is more important than the cost. But certainly, there's certainly times when the cost is just as important. So really, you really need a handle on all three of these metrics.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. I feel like it doesn't make much sense to measure just whether they're good, whether they succeed or don't succeed, because there are more elements to the puzzle. Right. Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about the ranking system, because I found this interesting in the past, because I've run into this same model, the A tier, S tier model. And I actually think this is a fantastic way to represent this information to the world, because it's familiar on a web scale.
Yeah, and so this is our second power ranking. We did one in August, and then we updated it with the Anthropic 4.5 release of Opus, and GPT-5.1 dropped, and the Grok 4.1 dropped. Like, there was a lot of stuff that dropped in late November, and so it was time for a new power ranking. But yeah, we did want to have a little bit of fun with it, and rather than just put a number on things, use a little bit of human judgment on allocating these models into tiers based on their performance. And of course, if you're coming from the video gaming background, then that S tier stands for Shu, which is Japanese for excellent. And so in this iteration of the power ranking, our only member of the S tier. To be S tier, you really have to be firing on all cylinders. You really have to be better than everyone else on multiple dimensions. And really, that's what Haiku's doing this time around. It is better than everyone else at speed and good performance, good intelligence, and a reasonable cost.
Yeah, and from my experience, when I first joined Brokk, I was that kind of took me by surprise. So as a result, I said, well, okay, let me revisit some of the assumptions I might have, because when Haiku first hit the lists, I thought, well, this is probably just a watered down version of Claude Sonnet, or obviously not Opus, and plus it comes in at a lower price point as far as tokens are concerned. So I thought, well, I'm not going to get as much out of this as I thought I would. But after looking at the power rankings, I went back and revisited, and I was shockingly surprised at how good it was at not only solving the problems that I was running into, but not being quite as chatty as Sonnet is.
Yeah, I think if I'm going to call out, like, what are the most controversial things on this page, the Haiku being alone in S tier is one. GPT 5.1 being on the same tier as Opus 4.5, I think that's probably going to be a little controversial, as well as Grok Code Fast 1. And then Gemini 3 Pro being down in C tier might also be a little bit controversial. But I'm here.
That jumps right to mind, because the whole web, not less than a couple of weeks ago, was like crowning the new king, and we found that maybe not. I mean, when you look at it from an all points in vantage point, it may be fast, and of course things that came with it like Nano Banana are pretty amazing, but as far as how it performs in a coding task, and we found we found a different story. And maybe you can talk a little bit about what we found when you put Gemini 3 through its paces.
Yeah, we'll do that in just a little bit, but first I want to defend my S tier pick and explain where that's coming from.
That sounds great.
And before we do that, I just want to point out that the power ranking data set is public. We have a GitHub repo, Brokk AI/power rank. It's Apache licensed, so knock yourselves out, dig into the tasks. But those are tasks coming from 5 open source Java repositories, where we've said we've taken commits from the Apache Cassandra, Apache Lucene, LangChain4j, JGit, and Brokk itself, and we've asked an LLM to generate synthetic tasks using those commits, and those tasks, those tasks are there, and the run harness is there, and so yeah, it's all open source. So if you can show us how to do this better, we'd love to listen, because this is driving our product decisions as well as our coding as engineers. So we're very invested in making sure this is as accurate as we can make it.
Yeah, I know that this is on my hit list of things to do. Is I would love to add my old alma mater to the list and pit it against the current version of Nginx Core. I think that would be a nice addition. It's kind of in the same realm as the rest of the things that we're touching, and it's pretty much native C. So that would be an excellent test. I also think that one thing that I think would be interesting is to see what the experience of of the open source community, if they wanted to add their own tests, if they want to fork it and add own tests, or add tests as just sending in a PR. That would be fantastic to see that.
Yeah, the one hurdle to participating there is that if you want to run the full test suite, it does get expensive, especially with your Opus 4.5. And before Opus 4.5, we benchmarked Opus 4.1 for August, and that was 3 times as expensive. So yeah, it can get pricey. But let's dig into the results here. And okay, this is my illustration of why Haiku 4.5 is alone in the S tier. And this is the most qualitative judgment call on the tier list. And the reason it's qualitative is that I've drawn a line here at about 45%. And that's on the one hand, it's an arbitrary number, but on the other hand, it's guided by my experience using models full-time to write code with for the past 6 to 8 months. And above that line is where you stop needing to hold the model's hand so much. It can handle larger tasks that have more components to them and figure out how to do those across multiple files and so forth without you having to break it down for them further. And so, yeah, could you say that the line really should be 55%? Maybe. Could you say it should really be 35%? I think that's a little bit, I think you would be disappointed with most of the models below 35%. So 45% is my experience and my intuition of this is above this line, you can get a lot of good work done with the models with a minimum of hassle. And so given that minimum level of intelligence, the most important thing when I'm coding with the model is how much does it make me wait? Because when I'm waiting, I'm starting to fidget. I'm thinking, oh, like, I can wait for a few seconds, right? But if it turns into a few minutes, then it's like, oh, what's on Hacker News? Like, what's on X.com?
Yeah, I'm distracted now, and I'm losing productivity by the second. Yeah, and you don't know what's going on if you, and that's something we address as well. But in Brokk itself, giving the visibility that's necessary to what's happening in the background. I start to get worried personally. I start going, okay, what is it doing? What is it change? What's it touching that I can't see, that I'm going to have to spend the next 3 hours fixing, which is something that I think everybody's experienced when they're coding with an LLM.
Yeah. And so I mentioned that you do need a decent budget to run the tests, and you also need a certain amount of patience and a fair amount of RAM, because the more you can parallelize the tests, then the faster you'll get done overall. And so you can see the numbers here. The first number there is not minutes, it's hours. So this was 5 hours of thinking time for Claude 4.5, 7.5 for Claude Sonnet, and 12 hours for Claude Opus. And so we're going from Sonnet, if we move to the right, above that line of Jonathan thinks these models are smart enough, we hit Anthropic before we hit someone else. And that's why Haiku's in the S tier, because I didn't want to give it a joint prize to all of the Anthropic models, but like these guys, Anthropic is cooking with something special, and Haiku is my go-to weapon of choice for coding out the plans that I've generated with a smarter model.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Plus, when you get into 7+ hours of thinking time, that is a non-trivial amount of time.
Yeah, and of course that's we're parallelizing that. We're running lots of tests in parallel, but it is a lot of time. Yeah. The next tiers, the A tier list, is basically who's on the Pareto Frontier for cost versus performance and cost versus speed. And Pareto Frontier means that if I'm looking at, I've drawn it out on this graph. So Grok CodeFast 1, GPT-5 Mini, and GPT-5.1 are on the Pareto Frontier, which means that you cannot get less expensive without giving up performance.
Yeah,
and so
that's you have to give up something. This is the law of equivalent exchange, so to speak, where there has to be a trade-off. Just to clarify for folks who don't know what the Pareto Frontier is.
Right, and so that and this one, the speed versus performance, we've got Haiku, we've got Sonnet and Opus. Those models that we connected with those lines on the frontier, those are what made it into the A tier. And this is my other somewhat arbitrary judgment call, where I said, look at that bend, right? So on the cost versus performance, the graph is going up. It's kind of curving up and to the right. And on this one, it's going kind of making a dent the other direction. And that means that if you look at it from that perspective, it means Claude 4.5 Sonnet is a worse value than Haiku or Opus, because you're not getting as much performance as Opus and you're not getting as much speed as Haiku. So I said, you know what, even though it's on the Pareto Frontier, you're not as good as your two brothers here. And so I'm going to put you in the B tier.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, it's if you're working with one measurement, I mean, I'm not sure, that's where that calls into the usefulness of a single measurement,
And then the last thing I promised was a defense of why Gemini 3 Pro was all the way down in the C tier. And to visualize that, I wanted to put all three metrics on a single plot. And so I've got this radar chart here where I've got speed, score, and price for those three models. And I've normalized the speed and the price to you get 100 points if you're the fastest one. And then the other scores are what percent of that are you. So if GPT-5.1 is twice as slow or takes twice as long as Opus, then it's going to have a speed of about 50. And that's what we see here. It's actually a speed of about 40. So Claude is really fast and really smart, and GPT-5.1 is really inexpensive and really smart. And Gemini 3 Pro is neither fast nor inexpensive, and it also gives up a little bit in intelligence to the other two models. And so that's why it's clocking in here. And by the way, I fully think this is a preview, right? And I fully think that when Google launches the full model, that it's definitely going to bump up on the intelligence level and maybe on the others as well. Because right now, when I looked at the results coming out of the test harness, there were a bunch of tasks where Gemini 3 got stuck in a loop, and it would just
I was going to say,
it would just
I've
be
seen the
outputting the
reasoning.
tokens. I'm ready to submit my answer. I'm ready to be done. I've solved the problem. And it would just be looping and saying that over and over and over. And it never actually would solve the problem.
It had some weird reasoning loop, and you could watch that if you just watch it. It's like if you just look at Gemini, even if you're not trying to code with Gemini, you just look at Gemini 3, just ask it a question and then follow its reasoning cycle. It's continually second guessing itself over and over and over. And I feel like that manifests in the coding space as
that's a tricky thing to get right, because multiple labs do that. And what they're doing is they're trying to get the model to think long enough to get to its maximally good answer. So they'll just, I don't know what's going on under the hood with Gemini, but a lot of the models will just they have a very high propensity to generate tokens like wait or actually, and that sends it off in a kind of checking its work direction. And so that's a useful thing to have, but not only if you don't get stuck in that mode.
Yeah, and that's where it's like there's a saying that I saw from you recently where you said it doesn't have to be gold plated, and I feel like this is the LLM equivalent of that. It's like, okay, you need to reach a point of good enough, and then just stick a fork in the sand, and then we can correct context from there if necessary, but you just can't keep doing that forever because people you're burning tokens and time.
Right. So the other thing that I wanted to show then is, we kind of took a look at the big boys and, what am I going to do when my boss is paying for it? And then this is a visualization of kind of the budget category. So if we zoom in on the graph of cost versus performance, who's delivering the most intelligence at the lowest price? And it's really these three models. It's GPT-5 Mini, and it's two models from XAI, which was actually surprising to me. And last time around in August, if I remember correctly, none of the XAI models made it to the finalists round where we test them with the entire test suite. But this time we had two of them make it there. And Grok Code Fast 1, if you look at that blue area on the graph, it's at a really good spot where it's delivering amazing price. It's delivering very solid speed, and it's giving up a little bit on intelligence, yes, but it is delivering a lot for what you're paying. The other one that I think obviously is a good candidate for the best model to use in the budget category would be GPT-5 Mini, just because you're getting so much more intelligence for that price. But I mean, look at those graphs. So if you follow that 20 circle around to the upper left where that dot is for GPT-5 Mini, so that means it's 5 times slower than Grok Code Fast 1.
Yeah.
But by the way, Grok 4.1 Fast, that its upper left dot for speed is right next to GPT-5 Mini. So Grok 4.1 is a little bit smarter than Grok Code Fast 1, but it's way, 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 way slower. It should not be called fast. I think probably they didn't want to call it mini, but it's not fast. But Grok Code Fast 1 is fast, and it's low price, so it's a great deal. And the other thing I would point out is, besides the Brokk Power Rankings, the other unbiased source that you'll find for how good is this model is OpenRouter, because they publish a leaderboard of how much are people using this thing. And Grok Code Fast 1, last I looked, it was like something like 40% of the programming being done on OpenRouter is being done with Grok Code Fast 1. And now, granted, the OpenRouter audience tends to be very, very cost sensitive. But yeah, like that is people voting with their feet and saying, yeah, this is useful enough to write code with and do billions of tokens worth of inference on. So yeah, I came away, I didn't expect to find this. But I came away very impressed with Grok Code Fast 1, to the point that we've actually made that the default model for Brokk's free tier. So this isn't a presentation about Brokk, the development platform, but we do have a free tier where you can use as much Grok Code Fast 1 as you want, and to show you the power of Brokk.
That's cool. Yep. I think that, and I've seen this in other instances where I've traditionally picked on these models to do like low effort tasks, that I want to be, that I don't want to spend the time. So I'm not going to put something that I need a lot of reasoning or a lot of thinking capability involved with. So it's interesting to see that this mirrors with my personal experience and why unknowingly gravitating to these because of that. This is exactly what we're seeing on this graph.
We'll have to create a new benchmark called Dylan bench or something.
Yeah.
The next thing I wanted to talk about is the open models. So we looked at we put 4 open models in the finalists category this time around. And so these are those 4, with GLM 4.6 doing the best on the intelligence metric, which is interesting because it's a couple months older than DeepSeek 3.2. I think just anecdotally, again, I have no inside information here, but it looks to me like DeepSeek has not prioritized coding power a whole lot in their training, not as much as Qwen, for instance, or GLM. And I think that's probably why, even though in general, newer models tend to do better, and this is actually the newest model on the slide, I think that's probably why. It's just not as high a priority for the DeepSeek guys. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to call this out too, because I mentioned at the beginning that one of the reasons that we created the power ranking was to see like who's actually cheating on the tests. And from the difference between what we measured and what these guys are publishing on SWE-bench and Live Codebench, it looks very much to me like Kimi and Minimax are in fact cheating on the test, because both of those guys published numbers that said, hey, we're better than GPT, we're better than Sonnet. And that's just not the case at all.
And that's an interesting outcome, because if you follow any of the AI folks that do regular news about this, I've seen Kimi just constantly bubbling to the top and being called out as a front runner based entirely off of what may ostensibly be a fixed test or a cheated on test.
I think the buzz around Kimi is around those numbers, and it's also the largest open weight model, or at least it was when it was released. It's a billion parameters. So GLM 4.6 is somewhere around half a billion, and DeepSeek is somewhere around 7 billion, I think. So people look at that and say, well, bigger is better, but in this case, it's not.
Yeah, and just for folks that don't know specifically what GLM is. I find that to be probably one of the most unknown AI users, but that's ZAI if you're looking for the chat equivalent of that. So
yeah, that's actually one that was flying under my radar as well. And when I posted the August power ranking to the Reddit local llama community, they said, "Hey, where's GLM?" So this time around, we went and we put it through the paces, and yeah, it is really good. One interesting thing about this is if we take those numbers from like the most recent and best performing open weights models, and we look at the top closed models from just a little while ago, the gap between these open 03, if I remember correctly, these were released in April and May, respectively, 03 and Sonnet. It's possible it was March and April, but they were a month apart. And then GLM 4.6 was September, DeepSeek 3.2 was November. So we're basically have a 6-month gap between the closed and the open models here. And they're just neck and neck in performance. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they're catching up fast. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things going on with the open models, especially for folks that are trying to do like the lower end ones, so things that are in the 2030B category, but they are shockingly performant for being for their source of origin. You know, these aren't $100 billion plus companies that are that are rolling these models.
Yeah, and so this is a good time to kind of answer a frequently asked question, which is people ask, so what is this score that you're measuring? Like, I just want the raw pass rate. Give me the raw pass rate, and I don't want to do that because it's materially different and worse if it takes your model multiple tries to solve the problem than if it takes just a single try. So we have a decaying score credit that you get when you solve the problem. And it starts off at 1 point for solving it on your first try. And then on your second try, it drops to, I don't remember, I think 0.65. It's a logarithmic curve. And so it decays. It never goes to zero. If you can solve it with an almost infinite amount of tries, you're still a little bit better than somebody who can't solve it at all. But we do want to have that penalty because you're wasting my time and you're wasting my money if it takes you lots and lots of tries to solve it. But
and this goes back to old adages, like when you're trying to build anything in the universe, if you have infinite people and infinite time and infinite money, anything is achievable. So, but at some point in time, you got to bubble it down to reality, and that is, what can we do with 5 developers in 6 months and $250,000 worth of money.
And this, so in general, so this is a graph I made. It's not on the official power ranking site, so it's text only, kind of an engineer's graph.
I like it.
But it shows two things. One is that the score that we're calculating with that decaying credit tracks very, very closely with the number of tasks that get solved successfully. So there's two interesting things that this shows. One is that we've got this fancy decaying credit that we're publishing in the power ranking, but it tracks very, very closely with a naive, like, did you get it to pass? Which is what's at the top and the bottom of this graph, respectively. And the other interesting thing is that the number of tries it takes you does matter when it's a very close score. So if you look at the 4.5 Opus and the GPT-5.1 scores, Opus outscores GPT by a couple percentage points. I'm looking at the average scores. I think in general, the average score is more useful. You can look at the best score if you want. I think they're both useful, but the average score is more useful, I think. But Opus is outscoring it by 2 percentage points in the average score. But if you look down at the pass count, GPT-5.1 actually passed one more task that Opus 4.5 did not. But it took almost 20% more tries overall. And so I think when you look at it like that, I think that the score metric is doing the right thing. It's it's solving the problem that it was created to solve.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, to put this in the context of, like if you're doing something like performance measurement against GPUs, it's something that a lot of people are familiar with. When you're looking at, do I buy, a 5080 or a 5070, you're really looking at, you really want to get that sweet spot that a couple more frames don't matter. In the grand scheme of things, especially if those frames come at the cost of several $100s, or in this case, a few more tokens.
And this highlights, by the way, one more controversial thing about the power ranking, which is that we have GPT-5 Mini just barely edging out Claude 4.5 Sonnet, both on the score and on the pass count. And fortunately, Opus 4.5 came out, and that's clobbering 5 Mini. Otherwise, I would never hear the end of that, because that is not intuitive to people. But like the data's there, guys. The data's the data, and I think if you give GPT-5 Mini a try, I think you'll be more impressed than you thought you would be. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is, since we were kind of on a journey through history there over the last 6 months, is the other frequently asked question I get is, well, what about Qwen 3 Coder? Like, why isn't that on your finalists list? Well, it was on our finalist list in August, but the other models are better. It's that simple. So you can see actually Qwen 3 Coder is faster than GLM or DeepSeek, but it is higher priced, much higher priced, and also not as intelligent. So it didn't make the finalist list this time around.
And to be fair, Qwen 3 is kind of a darling when it comes to sites like Hugging Face. There's a lot of people that it's their favorite model because it's their favorite model. So they would just want to see it. But again, we come back to what you just said not less than a few minutes ago. The numbers are the numbers, but it's there now. So people.
And I can understand that, right? So Qwen or Alibaba is the only group that's put out 2 generations now of coding specialized models. So yeah, I would definitely like to give them some love for that. But unfortunately, this time around, I couldn't. So hopefully Qwen 4 or Qwen 3.5 will get them back in the winner's circle. But for now, we're looking at GLM and DeepSeek as holding down the fort for the open weights. So we've talked about speed quite a bit today, because I just think it's just so overwhelmingly important to the quality of experience that you have with a model. And I wrote an article that concluded with saying that speed is the final boss for open models. And this is illustrating why that is. So we've got 2 of the 2 fastest open models from our finalists round compared with, are these the 2 fastest? I think these are not the 2 fastest, because Sonnet is faster than Grok Code Fast 1. But it's more interesting if we add a little variety. But yeah, if you look at those closed models, they are smarter and faster, and it's not close. We've got Grok Code Fast 1 twice as fast as Minimax and 50% smarter. And then you've got Haiku at 5 times as fast as GLM 4.6, and just narrowly edging it out on the performance aspect.
Yeah, if people don't want to take a second, if not third look at Haiku at this point, I'm not sure what more information could be provided to them. And and as a person who actually took that dive, it is an interesting outcome, to say the least.
So I do have one bone to throw to the Qwen stands out there, which is this slide of local sized models. And basically there's 2 categories here. There's GPT-OSS 120B, and then there's everyone else. And that's because 120B is really stretching the definition of a local sized model. Either you have a Mac that you've maxed out the RAM for what is it, $10,000 just about for their top of the line. Yeah,
or you're running a NVIDIA 6000 card with 96 gigabytes of VRAM.
Like these are it's easily a $10,000 investment to run 120B. But the others are all runnable on a 5090 or a more normal sized amount of Mac RAM. But there you can see that size does matter. Like there's a fairly big gap between the 30 billion size models. And if I remember correctly, Qwen 3 Next is actually 80 billion, but it's not specialized for coding, so it's just not as good. Yeah, so I want to have a coding LLM that lives on my desktop, and I've got the dual GPUs to prove it. But like, especially when you throw this in, right? Like Grok Code Fast 1 was not our top performing closed model. It was at the bottom. It's a great value, but it's not nearly as smart as Haiku or GPT-5 Mini, let alone the bigger models. By the way, the reason the number's different here is that this is the open round. Like the only model here that qualified for the finalists was Grok Code Fast 1. And so these are the open round problems. They're a little bit easier. And so that's why Grok Code Fast 1 is scoring almost 50%, but the others are not. So yeah. I definitely, like, I know people who are running local models and writing code with them. And if you've got the patience to wait for them spitting out tokens at 20 tokens a second, or if you've got the budget to drop for that $10,000 setup to get GPT OSS 120 billion doing, I saw people on Reddit saying they're doing 150 tokens per second, which is really fast. Like that's faster than Haiku, but that's a lot of money that it takes.
I've seen enthusiasts that are rolling with like four GPU rigs that are like 30 series 90 cards that had a reasonable amount of RAM, but they're investing some serious time and energy into those rigs.
I mean, I've looked into this enough to know, right? Like even if you're going 4x 3090, like the cooling that you need, the power requirements that you need, those are not trivial.
It's a small rack machine to get that kind of performance for sure.
Yeah. So like if you enjoy it, like great, like enjoy, right? Like it's only going to get better from here. But in terms of like, does it make economic sense to spend the money on one of these workstations so I can run one of these models? No.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a DGX, system lying around someplace, go for it. That's what I would say.
Yeah. That's totally reasonable. So that's the tier list. That's the December tier list, 2025, and we'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today, and this has been educational for me, and I'm sure it will be educational for all the folks that have a look at this. And of course, if you have any questions or if you're curious, I would say go to the GitHub repo. It's right on the page where you would find the actual right here at Brokk.a. Go to the Power Rankings, hit the GitHub repo. Take a look at what we're testing. That's the proof is, in my opinion, there's no better source of truth than to look at the repo that's generating what it is we're seeing. So there's nothing in the dark. It's all for folks to see. So again, thank you for your time, and come visit us at Brokk.ai and check out our Power Rankings.